Hi, folks. Thanks for joining. This is Joshua Lambert. I'll be hosting this with you along with Donna. And first of all, we'll kind of go through some ground rules here. The slides will be available, so don't worry about trying to capture those. We'll post them up later, and we'll send an email out with a link to go through and download those by email. And we'll also have the recorded version of this webinar up probably sometime tomorrow. It does take some time for that to get all processed, but we'll hope to have that up sometime tomorrow as well for everyone who missed it or had to maybe leave halfway through. But as far as today, we'll be covering enabling iPhones and iPads in the enterprise. This is about the fourth time we ran this, and each time we get more and more attendance. So it's a good thing for us, a good thing for Apple, and hopefully a good thing for you folks as well. Started about a year ago, and this whole area has only just gotten more and more important here as more and more devices are sold. For example, Verizon, I think, doubled their sales of iOS devices just in the last quarter alone, and certainly Christmas has really been an important season for Apple as these devices, especially iPads, tend to be great Christmas gifts here. But with that said, we'll try and get this underway here, and so I'll pass it over to Donna Lima, who is a member of our customer engineering team. She'll run through the presentation, and then during that, we'll have a couple polls that go through. So please be ready for those, and hopefully we can get some good information, as well as show you folks what the results were after they're wrapped up as well. So with that said, Donna?
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. So I'm just going to go over our agenda for today. We're going to be talking about how companies are embracing the iPhone and iPad opportunity. So how do businesses really cope with people bringing in personally owned mobile devices as well as corporate-owned devices? How do we really manage those to make sure the data is safe? Best practices for mobile device management. So a couple of things that we've come across as a company to help you manage these devices. Some of the existing tools that are out there today to start managing your iPhones and iPads. And then lastly, we'll also go over iOS 5, as well as discussing some of our MAS 360 platform capabilities. So let's get started here. So we found that within the last year or so, 2012 is the year businesses are really confronted with the mobile device challenge. So you have users out there bringing in their own mobile devices. As Josh said, a lot of them got them for Christmas. So the first thing that they're going to want to do is set up their corporate email on these devices. So how do we really manage these devices from a corporate perspective? So you have, as well as iPhones, you have Android devices out there. So you want to make sure that your BlackBerry and Windows mobile devices are also all being managed in one centralized platform. With users bringing in their own corporate-owned and as well as employee-owned devices, you'll find that the business will benefit from this. So if I'm always connected, I'm going to be working more at night, on the weekends. And then also, if I'm bringing in my own device and I have my own mobile device plan associated with that, it's also a cost savings for the company as well.
All right. So with that, we'll launch our first poll here. Give us 1 second while this goes out to you folks. So the first question will be, what are the drivers for iOS adoption in your enterprise? First one is A, iPhone is available as a corporate-owned smartphone. B, enable use of the employee-owned iPads and iPhones. C, deploying corporate-owned iPads to replace augment laptops. And D, deploying custom line-of-business applications for iPhones and iPads. So we'll have this open for a couple more seconds here, and then everyone should be able to see the results after we're wrapped up. Another 5 seconds to go here. All right, so looks like answer B here, enable use of employee-owned devices, is definitely number one, followed by deploying corporate-owned smartphone, corporate-owned iPads to augment and replace laptops, and followed by a close third there of iPhones available as a corporate-owned smartphone. Interesting there, and D, of course, is last, and hopefully the results are now showing for everyone down below there.
Okay. moving right along here. So the best practices that we wanted to talk about today, you want to make sure that you're being realistic in your environment. So you know people are out there getting these devices. The first thing they're going to want to do is, hey, I want to get my corporate email on these devices. So they're going to want to connect to corporate data, get their email, etc. So you want to make sure that you're realistic about it and you're allowing multiple platforms. So yes, we're focused on iOS devices today, but realistically, there's Android people out there, you know, BlackBerry users, etc., that are going to be bringing in other devices as well. So you want to make sure that you're being realistic about that. You want to make sure that you have a multi-platform discovery tool so you can go out there and you can find these devices coming into your environment. You want to know what Windows devices are connecting to your Exchange or your Lotus Traveler environment. You want to see, you know, who has iOS devices versus Android, etc. You want to make sure also that there's a quarantine policy and an approval workflow. So you're allowing these employees to bring in these mobile devices. You really want to make sure that you have a process around it, a workflow, and a quarantine workflow as well. So yes, today with Exchange ActiveSync 2010, you can enable auto quarantine. It's not the easiest thing to do. With our MAS 360 MDM platform, we do bring that capability to 2007 as well as 2010 with a very easy workflow and one place to do all of your quarantining and allowing and approving of those devices in your environment. One of the big ones, and probably the most important, is you want to make sure that you're enforcing security precautions and security policies on these devices. So you want to make sure that there is a password-protected policy in place on the devices. So when the user goes to open up the device, they are prompted for a passcode. You want to make sure you can remotely wipe these at any given time if the device is lost or stolen or an employee, let's say, leaves the company. And then also encryption as well. So you want to make sure these devices are secure and encrypted. A policy around Bluetooth, we also want to enforce that. We want to make sure that that's either hidden or non-discoverable. That way you can't scan using a PC and potentially download the private data that's on that particular device. You also want to start planning for a single console multi-platform or an MDM solution. So you want to make sure that this platform can really manage all of your devices out there. So laptops, tablets, as well as smartphones. You want to make sure there's reporting capability as well as inventory tools. And then also, you want to consider an MDM cloud-based solution such as MAS 360 to really make that easier on your management and implementation. Also, you want to make sure that you're putting the mobile device inventory and policy status in your IT operation review. So if you have weekly meetings, perhaps change control as well, you want to make sure that you're always incorporating the mobile device policies as well.
Thanks, Donna. At this point in time, we'll launch our second poll question here. If you have a hard time seeing it, some folks mentioned they weren't seeing the poll questions. There should be a poll section on the WebEx screen there. So if you aren't seeing it, maybe try looking for one that says polling, and that should hopefully have your poll questions there. This one will be, how does your organization currently manage iOS devices? The first one is the iPhone config utility. B is ActiveSync through Exchange or Notes. D is third-party MDM solution, or D is that we don't currently manage iOS devices. So we'll go ahead and get this out going to folks. And again, if you aren't seeing the polling questions, please look for that polling tab on the right-hand side there. So as your folks are going through this, we did a question come in about what does quarantine actually mean, and thought we could take this time to answer that while folks are pulling up the polling question. Quarantine means that the device can actually connect to the Exchange server, but does not actually receive any mail, contacts, calendars, or notes. And at that point in time, the device is sort of waiting for an admin to either approve or deny the device. And so it's a nice way to kind of get an alert to the admin and then have them go through and approve it either manually or automatically based on certain rules. Okay, looks like we're about wrapped up here on the time. So the two most popular ones here are B and D. ActiveSync through Exchange or Notes, or we don't currently manage devices. So I think that's probably number D here is why we're seeing a lot of folks enjoy this webinar and keep coming back as we host it, and potentially also as you see here, continue to have more and more folks join the calls. So, great.
Thanks, Josh. So the next section we're going to talk about are the tools that are available today to help you manage these mobile devices and make sure that they are secure. Outlook Web Access offers some management, Microsoft Exchange with ActiveSync, the iPhone configuration utility, and as well as a third-party MDM platform such as MAS 360. With Outlook Web Access today, or OWA, as most of us know it, there is the capability to issue a remote wipe on a mobile device. So you can do that as well as doing a recovery password, remove the device altogether to remove that connection with the Exchange server, and then also the remote wipe, which is what we're going to focus on today. To do that, you just simply have to log in, and on the left-hand side, there's a Mobile Devices tab. You would click on that, and then you would go ahead and do the Actions tab to do the wipe all data from the device. There's also a link up here, which you could use for further information on that as well. With Exchange ActiveSync 2007 as well as 2010, there are Exchange policies that are supported for mobile device management, such as enforcing a password on the device, and then also if you wanted to disallow certain things that are running on the device, such as the camera, or if you want to require device encryption as well. So within Exchange ActiveSync, you can set up mobile device policies. I will say it's not the easiest thing to do, but the support is there to be able to set up mobile device mailbox policies from the Exchange Management Console. So you can actually create the ActiveSync mailbox policy, and then you can set up the parameters around that policy. So if you wanted to require a password be set on the device, you'll see on the next screen here that you can require the passcode, and then along the lines of requiring the minimum password length, allowing the simple password, etc. There are certain options that you can set for any mobile device attached to ActiveSync today. Once that device security policy is created, you will see it listed here in the organization configuration under the client access container here within the ActiveSync Manager server. Also, turning on Exchange ActiveSync on your mailboxes is also a very granular detail that you need to go through each mailbox, go into the properties of that mailbox, go to the mailbox features, and actually enable Exchange ActiveSync on that mailbox to allow the mobile device to remotely connect to pull down email, contacts, and calendaring and notes from your Exchange server today. Also, to apply a specific mobile device policy to a mailbox, you again have to be very granular, dig down into that mailbox, into the properties, and select the default policy or whichever Exchange ActiveSync policy you would want to assign to that specific device. Another tool that we have seen out there today is the iPhone configuration utility. We do have a demo on this and a video up on our Master Center that will walk you through configuring and using this to create and install configuration profiles on your iOS devices today. So if you're looking for more information on how to use the iPhone configuration utility, if you're not familiar with it, you can go here and there's a detailed video, as well as the screenshot up here now will show you what you can expect to see within the iPhone configuration utility. So essentially, if the device is connected to your PC or your Mac and you have the iPhone configuration utility installed, you can then set the different passcode policies and the different payloads that lay down the provisioning profile on that device. So if you wanted to push down Wi-Fi or VPN profiles or email settings to that device, you could do that with the iPhone configuration utility. You would just have to have the device plugged in, and you would then push down the profile.
All right, thanks, Donna. At this point in time, we'll have our last and third final poll question here. It is, how are you managing your iOS devices today? The answers are Exchange, B, iPhone config utility, C, MDM platform, and D, not managing iOS devices at this time. So let this one run for a little bit here. Looks like Exchange and not managing are the early front runners. About a couple more seconds left to go, and then all you folks should have the answers there. But certainly it looks like D is the most popular with 50%. So half the folks on the call here are actually not managing this currently. And then the large majority otherwise are managing them through the Exchange system.
Okay. Now we're going to jump into iOS 5 here and go over some details on what that brings us. So as many of us know, that is the latest and greatest iOS version that came out recently. It's out there for the iPhone 3GS and above, as well as the iPod Touch, 3rd Gen and above, and all of the iPads. With iOS 5, they came out with 200 plus new features, including the big one, which is the iCloud, the iMessage, and Notification Center. Some other ones include newsstands, reminders, Siri, and then also there's no requirement now for a computer to be connected to your device to do any activation upgrade or a backup, which is nice. And then also they introduced the volume purchasing program, where businesses can purchase volume licenses for Apple software directly from Apple, and then that way they can push these applications out to their users, and they're already paid for, so you don't have to worry about your users having to enter in any Apple ID to pull down or pay for those business applications. Some of the key enterprise features: the iCloud, so you can automatically store and sync your music, photos, documents across multiple devices. The iMessage, which is much like SMS, but it goes over the data plan. It's supported on all iOS 5 devices, even the Touch. So if you have other iPod or iPad users out there, you can do a messaging client with them. And then also, as we discussed earlier, PC-free, so you don't need the computer to own the iPad to do any type of updating, activation, syncing, etc. It's all done wirelessly now, which makes it a lot nicer. And then also there is built-in MDM enhancements for mobile device management capabilities to be able to remotely manage those devices, such as using Maz 360 as a platform to do that. Okay, now I think we're going to jump into Maz 360 and some of the key features we can benefit from here. So I'm going to move to the next slide here for the Maz 360 overview.
All right, thanks, Donna.
Sure.
I want to take 5 minutes right now and dive into this key slide here. This is really how we approach and integrate into the various device platforms that are out there. We first start with the breadth approach, and then provide depth with more granular security and policy options for devices such as iOS and Android. For breadth, we allow the management of any device that leverages ActiveSync for either Exchange or Lotus Notes. This allows for an auto-discovery of any device using ActiveSync in your environment to get corporate email. It also allows you to manage these devices by the standard feature set made available through Exchange or Notes, like creating and enforcing ActiveSync policies, remote wipe, and auto-device discovery. Interaction through your Exchange or Lotus environment is made possible by our Maz 360 Cloud Extender. It's about a 13 meg piece of software which can be installed on your mail server or a server which is nearby your mail server, for example, and can communicate to it. It helps facilitate communication between our cloud platform and your environment and ours. One thing to note, though, it does not change or interrupt your mail delivery as it stands today, so we're actually not going to have any kind of mail flow through this. It's simply a sideband conversation about devices and things like that. It's designed to be very light touch, especially. For more in-depth management of iOS standard devices, we do have the additional integration. So for iOS specifically, we have chosen the method of integrating with Apple's MDM API. So Apple has made this available to some vendors to help manage these devices in corporate environments. This allows us to have the integration needed without the weight of an extra agent that's required. In a sense, Apple made it easy for us as well as you. The additional features you can use with this type of integration include performing a selective wipe, which is actually removing only the corporate information and leaving behind personal photos, contacts, music and videos, things like that. But actually wiping off all that email and contacts and things like that from your corporate enterprise data. It also allows us to push down configuration profiles, things like email accounts, Wi-Fi settings and profiles, as well as VPN information. For Android, we've also taken a similar approach, but they actually require us to have an agent on the device. And this is because the APIs are actually need to be run through an agent locally present on that phone or tablet. So for Android, we do have that extra control, but it does require the application on that device itself. So together with the ActiveSync integration, the iOS API, and the Android agent, we do allow for a complete management of mobile devices, and it all really comes together in our single window through our managed platform here, and allows you to perform actions on devices as well as review your own environment with our mobility intelligence reporting as well. So do you have any questions around how we integrate into the different device platforms? And so with that, as far as answering that question over here, next slide. Thanks, Donna. So here's the actual breakdown across the features and functionality of iOS, Android, as well as the Exchange and ActiveSync integration for Lotus Traveler, as well as Exchange, as well as our BlackBerry integration as well. And again, we will have these slides available online here, so don't worry about trying to capturing this or taking a screenshot. We'll have an email out to you as well. All right, so last over here, we've also been a part of the recent Network World MDM product test. They actually went out there and actually had an independent lab go out and install all the 4 different versions of some MDM third-party products out there. So ourselves, Master360, Tango, McAfee, and Sybase. And they actually kind of went through the whole installation process in a lab, connected to the Exchange server, connected to iOS devices, Android devices, kind of really took it for a complete spin, and then actually had some nice review as far as what are the pros, the pricing and cons, any kind of troubles they had getting up and running. And as you can see down below, we actually did pretty well in this test, and we're actually named the Clear Choice winner based on Network World's and the independent labs testing here. So especially what they had as far as the real key differentiator for us was really how easy it was and how fast it was to deploy compared to the others in this test. All right, so before we get to questions, we'll kind of do a quick wrap-up here. So we'll have our next webinar on January 19th, and that'll cover securing the Kindle Fire in the enterprise. So I'm sure a lot of folks, given the prices and kind of being on Amazon, will have a lot of these going out for Christmas, similar to iPads, especially given the even better pricing there. As well as we have a list of the past webinars we had recently, and you can see the link there as far as links, maz360.com/webinars, about some of the, you actually go out and actually review those. So it's about managing iPhones, iPads, and Androids with Exchange ActiveSync, controlling your data expenses, Kindle Fire versus the iPad 2, a friendly little battle there between those two great tablets, as well as a 3-part series in iOS 5. And that'll go into a lot more detail than we had here if you're curious, and kind of the new features and functionalities there. Plus, we have a lot of great how-to content in the Master Center. So we have our best practices guide there down below, as well as a series of strategy series from Lopez Research, as well as a glossary of kind of key terms and kind of what they mean as far as MDM, as we kind of all talk about things like ActiveSync and MDM and IPCU and these various terms. All right. So with that, what we can do is go ahead and start answering some of your questions here. We've been taking a list here of some that have come in, and so if you have any questions, please enter them now. But we'll go through some of the ones that came in earlier in the webinar here. So the first one that came in was, if everyone is bringing their own device to set up using their corporate email or others, will that increase the number of licenses, and will there be any security risk to the company? So that's a good question. Certainly, as you have more devices coming into your system there, Exchange will report those as extra devices, and so that could potentially increase your licensing, depending on how you set up with Microsoft. As far as the risk, certainly as you have more and more email on these devices that are out there, you do want to make sure you're doing that in a responsible way. And so certainly taking advantage of some of these controls you see here, like mandating a passcode policy, or perhaps maybe setting some of the other security controls you can do via IPCU, or even going to something like our solution, which is MDM, and allows you to have nice over-the-air control of these devices and instant 24/7 reporting available at all times as far as what's going on in these devices. So certainly, I would say that there is a risk to having corporate data there, but there are certainly ways to make sure that's handled responsibly and securely. All right, so the next question we got was, does Exchange ActiveSync manage the entire iOS device or just email? That's an interesting question. And so with Exchange ActiveSync, through the policies you saw earlier, you can actually do things like requiring a passcode and some various other settings which do actually set the complete device passcode, as well as the wipe action through Exchange is a complete factory reset. So in that sense, it kind of is managing the device, but anything beyond those settings is really limited to just the email account. So we can do things like controlling attachment settings and things like that. But aside from those two things, there isn't too much more you can do compared to other solutions like IPCU or the MDM platform, which can do a lot more, like 50 or 100 different settings. All right. So our next question was, are there any solutions for file management on the iPad? And so that's a great question. So we have our own solution for document management on the iPad, and we can provide a nice secure container and a way to validate who has content and who doesn't. As well as there's also a ton of applications out there, things like Dropbox, Box.net, SharePoint applications. And so there really is quite a great ecosystem there for managing data, managing documents, and files on these devices. So I think while we pull up some more questions here, the next one is, wiping the entire device will not go down well with our users that bring their own device. Are there any granular controls to control what is wiped? So that's another great question. We kind of hinted earlier at a selective wipe that's possible with an MDM solution. And so certainly with our solution, you can actually wipe out just that corporate data itself. And so what we can do is actually pull back that Exchange account, all of its data and mail, pull back that Wi-Fi, pull back the VPN settings, and kind of really remove all that access and data on that device and leave behind their personal photos, personal contacts, and personal email if they have it on that device. All right, so next question is, how does Master360 ensure the corporate data on the device is not lost to devices with Trojans? That's an interesting question. So on the iOS side, in particular, Apple does a pretty good job of actually ensuring that there's not too much malware out there. They do a hand review of each application and can actually also pull the applications off as well if they actually find that they made a mistake, which they've done a couple times. Beyond that, they actually have a really good security architecture where each application can really only, through technical limitations, talk to itself and no other apps. So for example, no app can really talk to another app. So they have really great kind of a sandboxing there. And then beyond that, we also have the ability, of course, to protect against anyone jailbreaking or rooting the device. And so with our solution as an MDM platform, we'll actually report back to you if someone has actually gone through and actually jailbroken the device for iOS or rooted it for Android, where some of those great security controls aren't there anymore. All right, so next question is, can you still remote wipe an iOS device if the person who has a phone simply removes the SIM card or disables network connectivity? That's an interesting question. And so on the Android side, we certainly can, since we have the application resident on the device that can actually perform that wipe. On the iOS side, we do require IP connectivity, either to the Exchange server or really any IP connectivity at all. So if they're online on Wi-Fi or on a cell connection, we can definitely get at it, even if they disable their mail account as well. Next question is it safe to assume that all these ActiveSync policy settings are specific to Exchange and not applicable to Notes environment? I believe Notes can actually also set some of these. And Donna, maybe you have any additional feedback here from your experience with Notes?
Yeah, so with Traveler, there are some policies that you can set. They're not as granular on the Exchange side, but there is some policy, the password that you can set to enforce that.
Thanks, Don. Well, want me to handle the next one as well?
Sure.
Sorry, Don.
No problem. All right. So the next one, we're managing our iPhones using Lotus Domino through Notes Traveler. Are you leaving this choice off your polling questions for a reason? No, we're not leaving it off for a reason. We do implement and work with Lotus Notes Traveler, as well as Exchange Active Sync, so that was probably just left out on our part, but we're certainly not leaving it out for any reason. I think sometimes we tend to lump Active Sync utilizing Notes Traveler as well, so that's probably what we did at that point.
Thanks, Donna.
Sure.
All right, so the next one is, from a security standpoint, how tough is it to manage company data when employees are allowed to use personal devices for business use as compared to company-issued devices when the company owns the device? So I think this kind of goes back to a policy question, really, which I think most companies kind of have to, be honest, answer for themselves. So from a liability perspective, certainly if the data is there, the company is liable in some way, regardless if it's a personal device or a company device. And so I think, who bought the device isn't always a great indicator there. But certainly for some things like a remote wipe or perhaps taking the device back after an employee leaves, those things are certainly easier with a company-owned device, to kind of do a complete wipe and just get everything off of there, versus a personal device where the person, still feels they have some right to that, that personal data on the device.
Yeah, and I think along those lines as well, what you can really do with the mobile device platform is set up policies. So you might have a different policy set up for your corporate-owned devices versus your employee-owned devices as well. And you might manage them a little differently, again, doing the selective wipe, most likely on personal devices, and then doing a full factory wipe on the corporate-owned and ensuring that you get those devices back.
Thanks, Donna. Next question is, will the remote wipe erase everything on the device or only email and or corporate data? So both Exchange Active Sync and Lotus Notes Traveler, I believe, as well as our MDM solution, do have a complete device wipe. And what that will do for both iOS and Android is actually a complete factory reset. So all data is deleted, and the device essentially looks like it came back from the factory, all brand new. So that can certainly erase everything. And then for MDM solutions, they typically have a selective wipe as well, which we've been talking about as well before. Exchange and Traveler don't have that function. All right, next question is, does this application work with devices that have been jailbroken or unlocked? So the answer is by and large, yes. In general, the application will continue to work. We do report back the status of that, so many folks want to know if it's been jailbroken or unlocked or rooted, but it doesn't actually break any functionality, really. It's just more of a kind of a question around the security and potentially whether they're loading anything like apps that have not gone through Apple's review process. Next one is, does Android Ice Cream Sandwich make the system enterprise-friendly? So Donna probably is the great person to answer that question.
So they certainly have some options and things that they've put into Ice Cream Sandwich to help with the enterprise adoption. I think Google's still working on getting up to speed on that, but they're certainly ahead now. Such as including encryption on the device itself. That's one of the main things that we've been waiting for. And then stay tuned, as we're also going to have a Ice Cream Sandwich webinar coming up here probably in the next month or so to kind of talk about those new features and how we can integrate that with our platform today as well.
Great. Thanks, Donna. It should be a good webinar to look forward to. I'll certainly try and attend. Next one is, can I restore my corporate email from my backup after it's wiped? If no, how come? So that's actually a good question we get a lot over here. So the answer is that in general, with iOS in particular, there is the iTunes backup, as well as iOS 5, there is the iCloud backup. And what that does is actually it backs up the settings of your mail client. And so, for example, things like the server name and things like that will be backed up, but the actual content itself is not backed up. And so hopefully that answers your question. As well as if you have an MDM solution here, like we do, that account setting is actually pushed down through our MDM solution. And so if you actually run a selective wipe or kind of turn the device down, so to speak, from an MDM solution, even if that account is backed up from an old backup, when they restore it, the device will go out and talk to our MDM solution, will be seen as an invalid device, and then have that content deleted again. All right, so the next question is, how is the iPhone config utility and the MDM platform different? So that's another good question. So the iPhone config utility in general has to be tethered by a USB, and so in most cases it doesn't really scale all that great from managing large number of devices. And plus, the other issue is that in many cases it can be used to set up an initial profile, and so you can use it to load on the Exchange settings, you can use it to load on certain restrictions and things like that. But once that device leaves perhaps the provisioning person's desk, there really is no further contact or control of the device. You really can't do something like run a selective wipe through iPCU or run a lock command or do things like that. That's no longer possible since there's no over-the-air communication channel back to iPCU. Whereas with MDM, we have that constant channel back to the device, and so we can always unlock the passcode in case the user forgot their passcode, lock the device, wipe it, run that selective wipe, or even change the configuration profiles as they're in use and out in the wild. So another question is, can Mass usually provide remote control capability on iOS? So that's a great question. I think that a couple of these to the span here. Unfortunately, remote control really isn't possible in iOS, primarily from that sandboxing issue. So part of the, I guess, the benefit of that sandboxing is that applications can't really do any kind of system level, screen sharing or things like that, and they actually mostly get shut off when the application or when the user presses the home button. And so because of that, the remote control really also isn't possible either. There are some folks who do like remote control or even like screen sharing inside an application or require it to be jailbroken and use something like VNC, but by and large, it really is not technically possible on a standard iOS device. Okay. I think that we've got most of the questions here. I will maybe wait a little bit longer here. I think there's one more about can we manage WebOS devices? And so we certainly can. And so devices that aren't the BlackBerry, Windows Phone 7.5, or iOS, and I might be forgetting any, I'm not sure, but devices outside of that can actually be managed through our Exchange or Lotus Notes integration. And so you can still see them. They'll still pop in the reporting, and we can still actually control and see them through Lotus Notes or the Exchange Access connection. They just won't have the deeper, so to speak, connection like we do with Android, iOS, or Windows Phone 7.5. The next question is, how can we limit access sync to only iPads and block iPhones from connecting? We currently manage BlackBerries and iPads, but not iPhones. But users have figured out how to replicate the settings and connect personal iPhones to our server for mail. So I think this actually goes back to that definition around quarantine. And so if you actually turn on a quarantine, you can actually see exactly what devices are trying to attempt to connect to your mail server, and then you have the option there to either block or allow them. So you're going to alert as soon as someone connects, and you can go in and see, is it an iPad, is it an iPhone, is it an iPod Touch, and you can then go in and either block or allow it. I think someone's asking, with the new iCloud setup, does Remote Wipe also wipe the data from the iCloud? I think that's the question here. Unfortunately, the answer is, for the most part, no. So if you have documents and settings and as well as photos, definitely those actually are being saved on Apple's servers. And so if you run a local device wipe, that data will be cleaned off of that device. But for example, if you then connect back, say perhaps you lost your own device, someone stole it, and you had data backed up on there, you got a new iPhone, you can then restore that contact back down from iCloud. So certainly it doesn't actually, wipe any data off that off iCloud.
Going along those lines as well, with the Mass 360 platform, you can set it up in the policy if you want to restrict certain settings within the iCloud. If you didn't want to allow a corporate-owned device to be able to back up to the iCloud, you can certainly set that up in policy to disallow them to be able to back up data to the iCloud.
That's a great point, Donna. Thanks. All right, keep on getting questions here, so we'll keep on going. If I were to install your product, what would happen to the currently connected devices? And so that's a great question as well. And so what would happen is if you actually enable the Exchange or the Traveler integration, what would happen is in about 15 to 20 minutes, you would see all the devices populate into MAS. No change would be performed, and so they would still be functioning as normal. You do have the option, if you wanted to, of sort of re-quarantining everyone, but for the most part, folks don't use that and kind of keep things situation normal, if you will, and then go through and start looking at the data and then reviewing things. And then from that point forward, You can have the folks actually enroll with either Android by installing the application, or with iOS by going to the website and kind of clicking through a few dialog boxes there. And that way they can start taking extra control of these devices and making sure they're under the more granular control.
Yep, so you can kind of think of our Cloud Extender piece for ActiveSync and Lotus Traveler kind of as a device discovery tool. So you install it on a server that sits in your network that can talk to your Exchange or Lotus Notes server, and it's going to pull back any mobile device record that's attached to your Exchange server or Notes Traveler server. So it really gives you a good indication as to who's actually out there connecting to your mobile, to your Exchange and your email environment today. And then you can decide if you want to take the action on turning on auto quarantine, so any new device that comes into your environment would get put into that quarantine state. You'd have to then go in and approve or block them. As well as with 2010, you can say any existing devices as well.
Great, Donna, thanks. So the next question is, does Managed 360 allow for App Store control? And the answer is certainly yes. And so we can actually go in and actually turn off the Apple App Store. And what that will do is actually take that whole icon off the system. The same can also be performed for the iTunes Music Store as well. And they'll be unable to go in and purchase new applications or otherwise, download new applications on that device. Another question is, can I differentiate between corporate-owned and employee-owned devices using Managed 360? And the answer is certainly. We do have the option there to specify whether the device is company or personally owned, and you can then use that field to run reports, set different policies, and do other things associated with that data. And so absolutely. Another question is, how will Managed 360 support new devices? New ones tend to come out every month. And so we certainly agree with you. This space is moving very, very quickly. What we try and do as a cloud-based solution is that we have a single multi-tenant cloud platform here. And so we actually run new releases about every 3 weeks for major new functionality. And so for things like Ice Cream Sandwich, iOS 5, we actually have timely releases that come out with that functionality when those versions are available. And so, for example, as soon as iOS 5 was released, we had functionality to enable or control iCloud that single day. And so certainly we try and stay ahead, and we actually can move quite quickly with our cloud-based solution here. And actually that also offers you the option to really not have to do much on your side. So there's no change control, no upgrading of devices on your side, no outages there. We all handle that on our side here with our cloud-based solution. And so it lets us go really fast. Next one up is, does Selective Wipe also include apps? And so that's a good question. And so what we can actually do here is with iOS 5 with the option to set whether or not the application should be removed. And so with that setting there, you can then control what applications should be removed if the MDM control parent is removed. And so with that, we can start to control the applications as well for devices that are on iOS 5. Next question is, what part of Managed 360 is cloud-based and what part is installed on our local network servers? And so that's a good question there. Most of the data here is in our cloud service. The only part that could potentially be installed locally is what we call our Cloud Extender, and that is a small 10 meg software which then talks to Exchange or Lotus Notes and does that integration. But that's not required, and you can certainly manage iOS devices, Android devices, Windows Phone 7.5 devices without the Cloud Extender, and actually have no thing installed at all, no software, no hardware on your network at all. I think that's most of the questions here. Another question that actually kind of come in is how effectively does Managed 360 control what apps can be downloaded by users? So on iOS, that's a good question. Unfortunately, we actually can't control or stop people from downloading applications, short of really turning off the entire App Store. What we can do is we can, of course, also report on what software is installed and then take action. And so we actually have an automated system which you can actually go in and set up either a whitelist or a blacklist of applications. So if you don't want folks to have, say, Angry Birds, you can set that as a blacklisted application. And if a user installs it, they'll go to a note saying, hey, you've installed an app that shouldn't be installed, and then an admin can configure actions to happen. So maybe you want to wipe a device, perhaps, or maybe you want to do a selective wipe as well. And so you can set those to happen if the user installs an application, and as well as a configurable time delay. So you can either have it happen immediately, or perhaps say 24 hours later, and give them some time to resolve the solution before that action is taken. And so it's actually a carrot and stick approach to that end. So another question is, would your solution still work if the corporation has outsourced the email platform to a cloud-based solution, such as Microsoft's BPOS? That's a great question. We actually have support for both Office 365 as well as BPOS-D, and so certainly the answer is yes. We can work. And we actually talk about through some secure channels to those servers through supported protocols by Microsoft. Going through a couple more questions here. Let's see here. We had a question, can I restore my email from a corporate account after it's been wiped? The answer is, and the question is, how? If not, how come? And so, it's a good question, and it depends on how the account was set up or pushed. If the account was pushed through our MDM solution, what will happen is after you do a restore, the device will check back into MAS, and MAS will say, hey, you should be wiped. And so, for example, we'll then not allow the device to come back in and actually have that account deleted. So another question is, I had a feature phone connected to my environment that did not have the policy applied, mainly the passcode. Does your application detect feature phones as well as smartphones? And the answer is yes. Through the Exchange server, you can determine what phones are connected, and then you can then take action accordingly. So commonly what we'll say is to actually have a quarantine policy approach in place, and that way you can try and catch these feature phones that might be getting email that don't support wipe, and then you can then actually have those blocked instead of having them allow them to connect actually to email and have that data on the device there. The next question is, how is the communication between your cloud and my Exchange server secured? And so the answer is it's a simple SSL connection through the cloud extender to our cloud service here. And as far as the data itself goes, we only store device data, things like what type of device it is, is the passcode up to date and compliant with their policies, things like that. We don't actually store things like email data or attachment data or things like that. The next question is, can I use MAS in conjunction with IPCU, MAS to enroll and track the asset, and IPCU to load the configuration profiles? So it's an interesting question. The answer is certainly yes. You can load your own IPCU profiles at any time, and then MDM can kind of layer on top and perform that that kind of over-the-air tracking and configuration. So certainly that works. But I will say that we do have all the functionality or from the policy setting capability and the profile setting in our own platform here. So you might not need to use IPCU anymore. So the next question is, how big is the installed base for the managed solution? We do have over 1 million devices on our solution here. That includes all the devices we manage. So certainly it's quite a large installed base. We have a large number of customers, large and small. And so without going into too many details, it's quite a large population of installed base. Going through the last couple of questions here, just see if we have any more. Next question is, once MAS picks up the devices on ActiveSync, is it up to the IT admin to determine which devices are personal versus corporate when sending out policy? And for the most part, it is up to the admin. There's no way to determine from the device if it was bought by the company or bought by the user. And so for a large part, it is up to the, either the admin or the user to say whether it's a company or person-owned device. Okay, well, I think we covered most of the questions here. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. Thanks for your time, and hopefully it was beneficial. We will have the recording available online tomorrow, as well as an email going out with the slides, a link to download them shortly here. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.